Intro. The night before, they were taking me to the nursing home. Tommy came down from the attic with an old dusty manila envelope in his hands. He said Mom told him to throw it away. I took the envelope with a weary smile. Tomorrow I'd be dragged off to a nursing home anyway, so I figured there'd be plenty to throw away. On my 67th birthday, my two sons handed me nursing home admission papers instead of a cake. The children I'd spent 40 years raising were trying to dispose of me. Only Tommy, the one everyone called slow, stayed by my side. I opened that old envelope without thinking much of it, and the moment I saw what was inside, I collapsed right there on the floor. But they had no idea. They never imagined that the dusty envelope my late wife had entrusted to our slow son would change everything. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from, and I'll be sending good health and blessings your way. Now let me tell you my story. An ordinary morning. I woke up at 5 that morning, just like always. 3 years since Susan passed, and still my body couldn't shake the habit. Checking the empty side of the bed had become routine by now. At first, that emptiness felt so vast I couldn't sleep at all. But humans are strange creatures. Eventually, you adapt even to grief. It was still dark outside my window. I slowly pushed back the covers and got up. My back ached. 67 years old now, and every morning reminds me my body isn't what it used to be. My feet felt heavy as I walked to the kitchen. I knew what day it was. My birthday. 67 years on this earth. When Susan was alive, she always made me a special birthday breakfast. She'd get up at dawn, cook my favorites, and when I came to the table, she'd smile that beautiful smile and wish me a happy birthday, telling me to stay healthy for another year. I'll never taste that cooking again. I've tried making her recipes myself, but it's never the same. Maybe it was her touch. Or maybe food just needs love to taste right. I opened the fridge and fixed myself a simple breakfast. There was leftover food from the night before, some things I'd prepared a few days ago. When you're an old man living alone, meals aren't anything special. You throw something together, eat it, and clean up. That's all. As I sat at the table, picking at my food, my eyes drifted to the family photo on the wall. Taken about 10 years ago when Susan was still healthy. The whole family together, Michael, David, Tommy, all 3 sons with their wives and grandchildren, everyone smiling. We were happy then. At least, that's what I believed. 40 years of sacrifice. I started working at a small manufacturing company when I was 26. I went to night school for college. Worked during the day, studied at night. Barely had time to sleep. My parents died young, so I had to pay my younger siblings' way too. My youth was buried under the weight of responsibility. I met Susan when I was 29. She worked in the accounting department at the same company. A quiet, shy woman, but when she smiled, her eyes curved like little crescent moons. Beautiful. We dated for a year and got married. The wedding was modest. We didn't have money for anything fancy. Our first home was a tiny rented apartment. In winter, the pipes froze and we had to carry water. In summer, it was so hot we couldn't sleep. But we were happy. Poor but together, and that was enough. When Michael was born, I cried with joy. My son, my own flesh and blood here in this world. I made a promise that day. This child would not live like I did. He would never go hungry. He could study whatever he wanted. He would walk through life with his head held high. David came along 2 years later, then Tommy 3 years after that. 3 sons. I worked myself half to death to provide for them. I left the house at 6 in the morning, often didn't get home until 10 or 11 at night. I volunteered for weekend shifts. We needed the money. 3 boys meant school fees, activities, allowances, clothes, food. The expenses never ended. Susan quit her job to raise the children. I was the sole provider for a family of 5. It was hard. God, it was hard. But I never complained. I was their father, the head of the household. This was my responsibility. When Michael was starting middle school, something happened to Tommy. Tommy was 10 when he got a high fever that wouldn't break for over a week. The doctors said it was meningitis. He survived, thank God, but there were lasting effects. His speech became slower. His movements became awkward. Everything about him lagged a beat behind other kids his age. The doctors were careful with their words. There might be developmental impacts, they said. He might have difficulty functioning normally in society. That night I went up to the roof alone and cried. Why my son? Why our Tommy? What did that little boy ever do to deserve this? After that, Tommy grew up being called slow. Kids at school teased him. His own brothers looked down on him. Every time I looked at Tommy, my heart ached. I felt so guilty. I should have taken him to the hospital sooner. I waited a few days thinking it was just a little fever, so I worked even harder. I had to leave Tommy enough money to live on for the rest of his life, enough that he'd never have to depend on his brothers. 3, everything I gave. Every time one of my sons went off to college, I tightened my belt a little more. Michael went to a university in the city. Tuition, room and board, living expenses. The monthly costs were staggering, but I gladly paid. I was proud that my son was going to a good school. David went to college too. Paying 2 tuitions at once nearly killed me, but I managed. I cashed out savings, canceled insurance policies, even took out some loans. I never told Susan. Didn't want to worry her. Tommy never went to college. He couldn't. I sent him to a vocational training program, instead hoping he could learn some simple skills for later. But Tommy couldn't adjust there either. He came back home and stayed ever since. I never blamed Tommy. None of this was his fault. I just worried. What happens to him when I'm gone? Will his brothers take care of him? When Michael turned 30, he came to me. Said he wanted to start a business. Import-export, he said. He and some friends had it all figured out. A sure thing, he said. He needed $100,000. $100,000. That was my entire retirement fund. Everything I'd saved over a lifetime. The money I'd set aside for our old age. Susan tried to stop me. She asked what we'd do for retirement if I gave him that money. How did we know Michael would ever pay it back? But I convinced her. If a father won't help his son start a business, who will? He'll pay us back when he succeeds. I gave Michael $80,000. A loan, I called it. But I had no idea that loan would become a gift. Michael's business collapsed within 2 years. His so-called partners disappeared with the money. $80,000 gone like smoke. Michael apologized, swore he'd pay me back. I told him it was fine, just stay healthy. Inside, I was bleeding, but I couldn't show that to my son. 3 years later, David announced he was getting married. Said he needed help with the down payment on a house. Just $100,000, he said. Another $100,000. I scraped together what was left of our savings, cashed out. Susan's life insurance. A father has to help his son buy a home. I'd be ashamed otherwise. Susan didn't say a word, but that night I caught her crying alone. I didn't know what to say. I just rubbed her back. By then, our retirement fund was gone. All we had left was the house we lived in, but I had no regrets. Taking care of your children, that's what being a parent means. Or so I thought. For Susan's death. Susan collapsed 4 winters ago. She woke up that morning saying she felt dizzy. I figured she just needed rest. Then at lunchtime, I heard a thud from the kitchen. I ran in and found her on the floor. A stroke. I called 911 and they rushed her to the ER. The doctors said she needed surgery. When they told me how much it would cost, my mind went blank. But what choice did I have? I had to save my wife. The surgery went well. But Susan was never the same. Her speech was slurred. Her left arm and leg were paralyzed. She needed rehabilitation. I took care of her. From the hospital to the rehab facility, from rehab back home. Every morning I bathed her, fed her, helped her exercise. At night I slept beside her in case she needed anything. The boys visited occasionally. They'd show up with a fruit basket, stay an hour, and leave. Said they were too busy. Times were tough. I told them I understood, it was fine. But inside I felt the sting. Only Tommy was always there. His speech was clumsy, but whenever I was struggling, he'd quietly bring me water. He'd tidy Susan's room, hang the laundry. That boy wasn't slow. Not where it mattered, not in his heart. Susan passed a year after her stroke. The night before she died, she called me to her bedside. She held my hand and struggled to speak. "Take care of Tommy," she said. I nodded. "Don't worry," I told her. "I'll look after him until the end." Susan managed a weak smile. She tried to say something more. Her lips moved, but she never finished. That was the last I saw of her. The boys came to the funeral. Michael and David wore black and cried. Whether their tears were real, I couldn't say. But I'll never forget what Michael said after the service. He asked whether they'd have to help pay for the funeral costs. He wasn't offering. He was asking if he had to. I told him not to worry about it. I'd cover everything. That's what fathers do, 5 alone. The house was too quiet without Susan. Retired now, with too much time on my hands, my thoughts grew heavy. What had I spent 40 years working for? What did I have to show for it? An aging body, an empty bank account, and a son the world called slow. We still had the house, of course. A decent 4-bedroom in the suburbs. Bought it 30 years ago when we were stretching every penny. Property values had gone up. Every time the news mentioned housing prices, I felt a little better. At least I had my house. That should be enough for my old age. The boys called occasionally. They'd ask how I was doing, but every conversation circled back to money. They wanted to know how much the house was worth now. They said it seemed too big for me to manage alone. Suggested I sell it and move somewhere smaller. Told me to let them know when I was ready to settle things. Each time I told them I wasn't selling, I was going to die in this house. Susan and I had spent our whole lives here. All our memories were in these walls. I wasn't leaving. Tommy lived with me. Past 40 now and still no job, just staying home, the neighbors whispered. Said I had a grown man mooching off me. That made me angry. They didn't know Tommy. They didn't know what he'd been through. But Tommy never said a word about any of it. He just quietly helped around the house. Cleaning, laundry, sometimes even cooking. The food was simple and clumsy, but full of care. Eating his cooking, I'd think to myself, is this boy really slow? Maybe the slow ones are somewhere else. 6, something felt wrong. After that, my 2 sons and their wives started visiting more often. At first I was pleased. They'd barely come around since Susan died. And now suddenly they were showing up all the time. I thought maybe they were finally trying to be good sons. But something felt off. When Michael's wife Karen visited, she asked all sorts of questions. How much money did I have in my accounts? How much was my pension? Where did I keep the deed to the house? When I asked why she wanted to know, she just shrugged and said she was curious. David's wife Linda was worse. She'd walk around the house looking at everything and make comments. Didn't I think the house was too big for just me? Wasn't it hard to maintain? She'd heard great things about those new assisted living communities. It bothered me, but I kept quiet. They were my daughters-in-law. I didn't want to embarrass my sons. One evening, both sons came over with their wives. After dinner, Michael said he had something to discuss. I listened. He said they'd noticed I was getting forgetful lately. They were worried about me. Forgetful? Me. Sure, my memory wasn't as sharp as it used to be, but I wasn't losing my mind. I was still perfectly fine. I told them there was nothing wrong with me. Michael pressed on. Hadn't I left the stove on last week? Wasn't I forgetting the keypad code at the front door? Had I left the stove on, forgotten the code? I couldn't remember. Actually, no, that never happened. David chimed in. They were just concerned about me, he said. Maybe I should see a doctor. Get tested for dementia. Dementia. The word hit me like ice water. Surely not me. I told them firmly that I was fine, not to worry. But there was something in their eyes that troubled me. It wasn't concern. It was something else. Something calculating. 7, the phone call I overheard. A few days later, late at night, I got up to use the bathroom and noticed a light on in the living room. I thought maybe Tommy was still awake. But as I moved toward the hallway, I heard someone talking on the phone. It was Michael's voice. When had he come back? I was sure he'd left after dinner. I peeked through the crack in my bedroom door. Michael was out on the back porch, phone pressed to his ear. He was keeping his voice down, but the house was quiet and I could hear everything. If we can get Dad diagnosed with dementia, we can file for guardianship. I couldn't believe my ears. Dementia diagnosis, guardianship? Once he's declared mentally incompetent, we get power of attorney over his assets. The house is worth at least $1.2 million. Split it down the middle. That's $600,000 each. My heart froze. My legs nearly gave out. I had to grip the wall to stay upright. Someone must have asked about Tommy because Michael answered, "That retard? What's he gonna do about it? Just put him in a group home." I looked into it. There's government funding. It doesn't cost much. A group home. They were going to put my son in a group home. My Tommy, whom I'd raised for 40 years. And Dad can go to a nursing home. Find a cheap one. He's not going to last long anyway. Not at his age. I couldn't hear any more. I went back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. My whole body was shaking. These were my sons, the boys I spent 40 years raising. I gave them $80,000 for my retirement. I gave them $100,000 for a house down payment. I scraped and sacrificed every time they needed money. Gave them everything Susan and I had. And this is what I got back. They were going to have me declared senile, steal my house, and dump me in some cheap nursing home, and throw Tommy into an institution. Tears came. I don't know if they were tears of rage or grief. They just kept falling. I couldn't stop them. Ate my birthday morning. And then my 67th birthday dawned. Both sons showed up that morning with their wives. I thought maybe they'd brought a cake. It's my birthday after all. Maybe they came to celebrate. But what they handed me wasn't a cake. It was nursing home admission paperwork. Michael told me to sign. He said they'd done a lot of research for my sake. This was a good facility, great care. Linda said it coldly. I was getting forgetful, wasn't I? They just couldn't take care of me anymore. Couldn't take care of me. They'd have to have taken care of me first. When had they ever taken care of me? I told them no, I wasn't going. Michael said I was being stubborn. This was for my own good. For my good? Right. For your 600,000, you mean? He said I just needed to sign. They'd take care of all the complicated stuff. Complicated stuff. Right, liquidating my assets would be complicated, but they'd handle that for me too. I pushed the papers away. I told them I was going to die right here in my own home. I wasn't going to any nursing home. Michael's face twisted. David's expression hardened. The wives sighed. That's when Tommy looked up. He'd been sitting in the corner, folding paper. He looked at me without saying a word. There was something in his eyes. Not sadness, not anger. Something I couldn't quite name. But nobody paid any attention to Tommy. He was just the slow one who'd gotten sick as a child. 9 unexpected comfort. After that day, my son's pressure only intensified. They called constantly. When was I going to the nursing home? Had I signed the papers? Yet? They came by to yell at me in person. Why was I being so difficult? Didn't I understand they were doing this for my benefit? For my benefit. Right. Get rid of Dad and take his money. That's what they meant. I held out. But I was getting worn down. I had no appetite. I couldn't sleep. What kind of life was this? 40 years of sacrifice. And this is how my children repaid me. One night I was sitting alone in the living room when Tommy came over. He was carrying a tray with a bowl and some bread. Vegetable soup. You could tell it was made with care, even if the cooking was simple. I thanked him. I ate the soup. It was a little bland, but it tasted good. It felt like the first real meal I'd had in a long time. Tommy sat across from me, watching. That look in his eyes again. His lips moved like he wanted to say something. I asked him what was wrong. Slowly, carefully, Tommy spoke. He said the brothers were bad. I was stunned. Tommy knew. I'd assumed he didn't understand, that he was too slow to see what was happening. But he'd seen everything. He'd felt it all. I admitted it. Yes, I said. Your brothers are bad. Tommy spoke again. He told me not to worry. He said he would protect me. That's what he said. Slow and halting, but clear. My heart swelled. This boy, the one everyone dismissed. He was the one promising to protect me. 10, the old envelope. The night before they were taking me to the nursing home, I'd finally given in. The boys had threatened to file for legal guardianship. They'd even brought a lawyer. He said that since I was showing signs of cognitive decline, a court would grant them control. It was all but guaranteed. I was exhausted. I had no fight left. Fine, I said. Take me wherever you want. If this is what my life has come to, I'd rather die alone in some strange place than suffer this humiliation in my own home. I was packing the few things I'd take with me. Some clothes, a photo of Susan. That was all. That's when Tommy came down from the attic. He was holding a dusty old manila envelope. He said Mom told him to throw it away. Mom told him to throw it away? What was he talking about? Susan had been gone for 3 years. Tommy explained, stumbling over the words. Mom gave it to him. Told him to hide it in the attic, and to give it to me when I needed it. I was confused. Susan gave this to Tommy to hide in the attic? I took the envelope, brushed off the dust, opened it, and when I saw what was inside, I collapsed right there on the floor. 11, Susan's secret. There were 3 things in that envelope. The first was the deed to our house, but the owner's name was wrong. It wasn't my name. It said Thomas Mitchell. Tommy, my youngest son. The second was a bank statement. The account was also in Tommy's name. The balance made me blink. $370,000. The third was a handwritten letter, Susan's handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Susan had written, "If you're reading this letter, then what I feared has probably happened. You probably didn't know. Or maybe you knew and pretended not to. That's just who you are, always trying to see the best in people, always holding back. It's one of your greatest qualities, and also what breaks my heart. But I saw it," she wrote. I saw the way Michael's and David's eyes changed. She asked if I remembered what Michael said when I gave him the 80,000. He said Dad was reliable. Not thank you. Reliable. Like I was an ATM he could count on to spit out cash. It was the same when David took the 100,000 for his down payment. He acted like it was owed to him. No gratitude. She said she saw greed in their eyes. They were just waiting to bleed me dry. So she made a decision. She had to prepare in advance. Susan had written that I never knew, but she'd been saving money too, little by little ever since we got married, skimping on groceries, on clothes, on everything for herself, putting it away where no one would notice. And her life insurance payout, part of the inheritance from her own parents, she'd kept that separate too. She'd transferred all of it into Tommy's name. The house, too, she'd written. 5 years ago, she had the deed transferred without telling me. Everything was done legally, properly. She'd consulted with a lawyer, paid all the gift taxes, made it airtight so the other boys could never take it. I couldn't see through my tears, but I forced myself to keep reading. Susan had written about Tommy, too. Tommy isn't slow, she'd written. Yes, after the fever when he was 10, his speech slowed down. His movements got a little awkward. But his mind is sharper than ours. He just can't express himself well. She wrote that I didn't know this, but Tommy reads books by himself at home. He writes too, keeps a journal every day. She'd sneaked to look at it once. His handwriting was messy, but his thoughts ran deep. Yet she'd made him live as if he were slow, on purpose. She was afraid of the brothers. If they knew Tommy was capable, they'd use him, make him manage money, sign documents, and then take everything. So she asked Tommy to pretend, to talk slowly, act clumsy. For 20 years, he'd kept up that act. She'd written that she was sorry, to Tommy, to me. But it was the only way to protect him. I looked at Tommy. He was looking straight back at me. Those eyes no longer dull, no longer vague, clear and bright. Tommy spoke in a steady voice. He said he wasn't slow. Mom told him to act that way because the brothers were dangerous. Not the halting speech I'd heard for 20 years. A clear, articulate voice. I couldn't say anything. I just wept. 12. The end of the letter. After I'd cried myself out, I read the rest of the letter. Susan had written that if I was reading this, it probably meant the boys had tried to throw me out, threatened to put me in a nursing home, maybe even tried to have me declared incompetent so they could take everything. But she told me not to worry. There was nothing left for them to take. The house was already in Tommy's name. No lawsuit could change that. The money was in Tommy's name, too. She'd made sure the other boys couldn't touch any of it. And she'd written not to worry about my future. She'd given Tommy instructions. When things got bad, he was to give me this envelope. He would be my protector. At the end, she'd apologized for not telling me while she was alive. She was sick and there wasn't much time. But she knew if she told me face to face, I'd try to stop her. I'd say we should trust the boys, that they were our children after all. That's just who I was. But she wasn't as kind as me, she'd written. She couldn't be. She wanted to protect her husband and her youngest son. She could give up everything else, but not that. Tommy will keep you safe, she'd written. Trust him, and live the rest of your life happy, at peace, without looking over your shoulder. If there's a next life, she'd written, I'll do better. I love you, Bob. From your wife, Susan. I held the letter to my chest and cried for a long, long time. Susan, I never knew you'd do all this. You were suffering, you were dying, and still you were thinking of us. Protecting me. Protecting Tommy. You were always so quiet. Never said much, never made a fuss. That's why I didn't see. I didn't know you carried all this inside. I didn't know how strong you were. I'm sorry. And thank you. Because of you, we can live. Tommy and we can survive this. 13. The morning everything changed. The next morning, my two sons arrived with their wives to take me away. They said the nursing home van was waiting, told me to hurry up and get my things. I walked slowly into the living room. Michael snapped at me to move faster. The car was waiting. I said to wait a moment. Then I called for Tommy. Tommy came out of his room. He was holding the envelope. Michael and David stared blankly. They couldn't care less what Tommy was holding. What would that retard know about anything? Tommy spoke. His voice was no longer slow. He said this house was his. Michael and David froze. The wives looked at each other, confused. Michael asked what he was talking about. Tommy held up the deed. The owner's name was Thomas Mitchell. Mom had transferred it to him 5 years ago. The room went silent. Nobody spoke. Michael snatched the paper. Read it carefully. His face went white. Tommy held up the bank statement, too. His name and a balance of $370,000. Mom had left it all to him. David grabbed the statement. His jaw dropped. Linda shrieked that this couldn't be real. 14, the weight of truth. Michael started yelling. He said it was fake. We must have forged it. Tommy answered calmly. He said it wasn't fake. He told them to check for themselves. Go to the county recorder's office. Call the bank. It's all real. David sputtered. He asked how Tommy was speaking like this. The Tommy they knew could barely string a sentence together. Tommy said he'd been acting for 20 years. Mom told him to. So the brothers couldn't use him. Michael's and David's faces twisted. It was hard to tell if they were angry or ashamed. Tommy continued. He asked if the brothers really thought he was stupid, thought he didn't understand anything. He said he'd known all along. He knew they'd bled Dad dry, knew they planned to have Dad declared incompetent so they could take everything, knew they wanted to dump him in a nursing home and put Tommy in an institution. He heard all of it. Karen spoke up. She said we needed to verify whether Mom was mentally competent when she did this. If she'd already had any cognitive decline, they could challenge it in court. Tommy smiled. It was the first time I'd ever seen that expression on his face. He said he'd already checked everything. He'd consulted a lawyer. All the gift taxes had been paid. There were no legal issues whatsoever. No matter how hard they tried, they weren't getting any of it. Karen's face turned red. 15, a father's decree. I watched all of this unfold, and my heart felt lighter than it had in years. 40 years of pent-up frustration, all releasing at once. I'd tried so hard to be good, to give my sons everything they wanted. I thought that's what a parent was supposed to do. But that wasn't parenting. That was being a fool. I called out to my two sons. I told them I'd given them everything. $80,000 from my retirement, $100,000 for a down payment, college tuition, wedding expenses. Everything Susan and I had worked for our entire lives went to them. I asked them what I got in return. They tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. They wanted to dump me in a nursing home. They wanted to steal my home. Is that what I raised them to do? Michael hung his head. David did the same. But I could tell they weren't truly sorry. They were just embarrassed they'd been caught. I told them the people who needed to leave this house were not me and Tommy. It was them. David tried to protest. He said they were still my sons. I cut him off. I asked if this was how sons behaved. Plotting behind their father's back, was that what children were supposed to do? David stepped back. I made my declaration. I told them never to set foot in this house again. As of today, they were no longer my sons. It hurt to say. These were the children I'd raised with my own hands. But I wasn't going to be used anymore. 16. The Fall of Greed. Months passed after the boys left. I heard from Michael not a phone call, but a letter from a debt collector. He'd tried starting another business and borrowed money against it. When it failed, the debts came due, and somehow he'd put my name down as a co-signer. I'd never signed anything, of course. He'd forged my signature. I pressed charges without hesitation. Michael was convicted of forgery. He got probation, but his credit was destroyed. His business was finished. Creditors were hounding him everywhere. Karen filed for divorce. Word was she'd screamed that she only married him for his father's money, and now that there was no money, what was the point? Michael lost his marriage. David's story wasn't much different. Once it was clear there'd be no inheritance, Linda showed her true colors. She told David she'd never loved him. She'd only married him for what she thought she'd get from his father. With that gone, she had no reason to stay. She handed him divorce papers and walked out. Both sons divorced at the same time. People whispered, "Tsk-tusk." They went after their parents' money, and look how that turned out. 17. A new beginning. A year passed. Tommy and I opened a small cafe together. It was Tommy's idea. He wanted to do something meaningful with the money Mom had left. I was nervous at first. Could Tommy handle customers? Would people treat him strangely? But Tommy was remarkable. Now that he didn't have to pretend to be slow, he blossomed with confidence. He greeted customers warmly, made coffee with care, even cracked jokes now and then. Customers would whisper, "That's the owner's son," they'd say. "He looks like his dad. Seems like a sweet guy." Every time I heard things like that, my heart swelled with pride. We named the cafe Susan's Place, after my wife. Her photo hangs on the wall, that beautiful smile. Every time I look at it, I speak to her in my heart. "Susan, can you see us? Tommy and me were doing fine. You saved us. Thank you." 18. What cannot be forgiven. One day someone walked into the cafe. He kept his head down as he entered. When I saw who it was, I almost didn't recognize him. It was Michael. He looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled, his face gaunt. Nothing left of the arrogant man he used to be. He said he was sorry. Said he'd been blind. Asked me to forgive him. Tommy looked at me from behind the counter. His eyes asked what I was going to do. I sighed. I asked Michael if he really thought I could forgive what he'd done. Michael kept his head down. I told him I could let go of the money. The 80,000, the 100,000 fine, he was my son. But he'd tried to have me declared incompetent and lock me in a nursing home. He'd planned to throw Tommy into an institution. He'd forged my signature on legal documents. That wasn't about money, I said. Those were things no human being should do. I told him if he came here looking for forgiveness, he should leave. I had no intention of ever calling him my son again. Michael stood there for a long moment, then finally turned and left. At the door, he looked back. There were tears in his eyes. Whether they were real, I couldn't say. After he was gone, Tommy asked if I was okay. I told him I was. For the first time in a long time, I really was. 19. Talking to Susan. At night, I often sit in front of Susan's photo. I pour a glass of wine and I talk to her. "Susan, the cafe was busy today. You should see how hard Tommy works. I never knew he had this in him." Michael came by. He wanted forgiveness, but I couldn't give it. I still shake when I think about what he tried to do. You're the reason we're okay. If you hadn't prepared everything, I'd be rotting in some nursing home right now. When I talk to her like this, sometimes I think I hear her answer. I imagine her smiling, telling me I'm doing well, asking me to look after Tommy. When that happens, I answer her. "Don't worry," I say. "I'll take care of Tommy until my last breath, just like you protected us." 20. What life means. At 67, I nearly lost everything. Betrayed by the children I'd raised for 40 years. Almost declared incompetent. Almost stripped of everything I had. Almost left to die alone in a nursing home. But I got back on my feet because of the love Susan left behind. Because of the secret Tommy kept for 20 years. Because there was someone who truly cared about me, I didn't fall. I've learned there are two kinds of family in this world. The family you're born into, and the family that lives in your heart. Blood doesn't make you family. Blood can turn on you faster than strangers. True family is different. They worry about you for real. They protect you. They cry with you. That's what family means. I have Tommy. The world called him slow, but he turned out to be the wisest of us all, the kindest, the most devoted. Every day I open the cafe. Tommy makes coffee. I chat with customers. Susan's photo watches over us. This is my life. This is the happiness I found. Late but real. Epilogue. Today, Tommy said he'd make me some pasta he'd been learning. I told him, sure, go ahead. He headed into the kitchen, humming a tune. I looked out the window. The sun was warm. People walked by. Children played. The world was at peace. For 40 years, I didn't know. I didn't know happiness was this close. I spent so long worrying about what others thought, keeping up appearances, giving everything to my children. I never stopped to take care of myself. My own happiness was always last, not anymore. The rest of my life is for me. With Tommy by my side, with Susan watching over us, I'll live in peace. That's the happiness I found.